All right. Thank you all for attending the our first webinar of the USPA in the 2025 and the ninth one of the entire series. So today we have the great pleasure of inviting Dr. Nancy Fresco to give us a talk on a SNAP. That is a scenarios network for Alaska and Arctic planning. And first of all, I want to talk about the format of the webinar. So I'll first give just a couple of minutes introduction, and then Dr. Fresco would give a about 40 to 45 minutes a talk, and then we'll want to leave about 10 minutes in the end for the Q&A. Well, so this is our webinar format, and the audience won't be able to share your screen or speak up, but you can type your questions under the Q&A button. So at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and there's a button inside. There's a question mark and a Q&A, and if you click it, and you can type the question, and feel free to type a question during Dr. Fresco's talk, and then in the end. She will, answer the questions in the sequence. So the 2025 USP webinar series is sponsored by Arctic Foundation's P&D engineers, Shannon and Wilson, and WSP, and we appreciate their support and their financial support for the webinar. Will go entirely to the travel award for our students and early career professionals for them to attend field trips or conferences. First, I want to give a quick introduction of Dr. Nancy Fresco. Dr. Nancy Fresco has been our SNAP's network coordinator since the group's inception in 2007. And she's the research associate professor at the International Arctic Research Center, or IARC, at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And she also teaches in UAF's School of Natural Resources and the Environment. She works with a wide range of collaborators. I guess if you work in the Arctic, and the house has to be wild. And those collaborators includes our partnerships with other researchers and data analysts and state and federal agencies, rural and urban communities, and indigenous entities. She focuses on linking climate models and geophysical models and ecological models to the questions, existing knowledge, and communications needs of planners, managers, and right holders in Alaska and the Arctic. So with that, Dr. Fresco, thank you so much. And so I'm going to turn off my
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's exciting to have this opportunity. So good morning from Fairbanks, Alaska, the lands of the Lower Tanana people. I'm currently at home. I work on the Trothieta campus. It's 9 a.m. here. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where people are calling in from. And yes, I will try to keep my talk to the allotted time and leave plenty of time for questions, and feel free to type those in at any time. To add to the introduction there, I am not actually a permafrost researcher or a geophysicist by background. So my background is actually in terrestrial biology, terrestrial ecology, but I have been working, as my background info indicated, for a very long time in cross-disciplinary climate research and climate modeling. And so I've had the great pleasure of being able to work with many people who have a tremendous amount of expertise in permafrost research. And I'd like to mention Dr. Sergei Marchenko, who unfortunately passed away last year. His permafrost research did inform some of the work that I'm presenting here. Many other colleagues as well, but I wanted to mention him at the start. So I'm already sharing my screen, and I need to minimize my face here so I'm not looking at myself too much as I progress. Was pointing out that we're appreciating the return of the sunshine here in Fairbanks. So I'm a little bit backlit. In any case, as I already said, I work at the International Arctic Research Center, and I'm going to be talking a bit about some of the latest data availability and models available through the research group that I'm part of. So hopefully, oh, there we go. So this is just a little bit of an outline of what I'm going to go through. I'm going to talk about data sources, direct data sources for those who might be interested in data downloads and doing your own more technical data manipulation. But then I'm going to go through some of what we call web tools, which are essentially websites that make the data and models much more accessible for those who are perhaps less able to do all their own programming from scratch. So I've got 3 of our web tools that I'm going to highlight. One that's called the Community Permafrost Tool, which is relatively simple. Northern Climate Reports, which contains a lot of data, but is still a tool, a resource intended very much for the general public. And then the third one, the Arctic Environmental and Engineering Data and Design Support System, which is a little more technical, and the title kind of indicates who it might be useful to. So for data and infrastructure work and the engineering side of things. Then I'll talk a little bit about our API and a little bit about a very, very new, like not even beta testing, but we're sort of in the alpha stage with a data sharing site called the Arctic Data Collaborative. Obviously, there'll be questions and answers at the end of this, but you can check out our website directly, and you can also contact me directly. I can share my email as well. So jumping straight into this, first of all, just a very, very brief overview of the data I'm discussing. I can't do justice to all the people who've worked on the data and the downscaling, but essentially the data I'm talking about are downscaled mostly from global climate models, based on modeled baseline data rather than on historical observations. That becomes important, particularly when we're talking about engineering applications, about essentially updating people's data use from the historical to the current and into the future. We try to be really clear and really transparent about what data we're using and when we're using a baseline that's historical observations and when we're using essentially a modeled baseline. The reason why historical data are often essentially modeled rather than being direct climate station data is, of course, that there are very, very few actual climate stations in Alaska. As you all know, Alaska is vast and mostly remote, and when we're looking for historical data, we're dependent on very few data points that don't necessarily cover all elevations, all conditions, and we want data without gaps. We want essentially raster data so that we can have continuous maps. There's compromise there because, of course, raster data, if you want to have every pixel counted and you want to have continuous data, there's a lot of interpolation, a lot of modeling that goes into creating those rasters. But in brief, the models that I'm talking about are driven by downscaled and rasterized climate model output from geophysical, hydrologic, fire data, ecological data, all based on the best available models from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and other sources. So here's a quick rundown. We do have observed historical data, but again, this is raster data. We've used both CRU, for those who are familiar with downscaling methods. We've used CRU, Climate Research Unit, gridded data for downscaling, and we've also used PRISM, the Parameter Regression Elevation Slopes model, to create gridded data. And we've got modeled historical data all the way from as far back as the 1850s, although much of our model data does not go that far back. And then important here, obviously, are the projected data, trying to create data sets that offer not just one, but multiple possible futures, often averaged decadally, out to 2100, based on global climate models, and the various concentration pathways associated with those climate models. When I reference climate pathways, obviously that's terminology from CMIP 5. We're currently transitioning all our data to be the more up-to-date CMIP 6 data, again, referencing the latest models from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So I'm rushing through this just to give that background, but we have various resolutions in time and in space. We always try to present data showing multiple models and multiple greenhouse gas futures or emission scenarios. That can get a little confusing for casual users who aren't used to seeing too many dots on a graph, too much information, but it does try to keep us honest because, of course, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't predict one single future. So in order to be realistic, we have to present multiple futures. And this is just a screenshot of our main website with, again, showing you where we are. From here, a lot of the screenshots that I'm sharing in this presentation, you can navigate to that from this site. So under the tab that says Tools and Data, you can get to both the raw data downloads that I reference or all of the tools that I'm going to highlight. You can meet the team, find out the collaborators that I'm talking about. I'm presenting again on behalf of a lot of people, particularly technical and programming folks who are not themselves professors, but who do a tremendous amount of work with all of the data wrangling and downscaling. So this is a screenshot. If you go to tools, this is not even a complete list, but we have these icons to help you sort of find your way around, navigate. This is to give a sense that we've created a lot of these web portals to make accessible all the background data that I just referenced. So people who are concerned or interested about climate change, or who are tasked with looking at climate change futures as part of their work, which might be for planning, creating a climate change plan for a rural Indigenous community. It might be considering climate futures for an engineering project, a very wide range of rights holders who need climate data in Alaska. They can come here, they can choose one of these tools that obviously are not just about permafrost, but many, many other climate-related factors. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to be highlighting the three that are boxed in orange here, which I mentioned at the beginning. So community permafrost data is the one I'm starting with. This is actually quite a simple tool. I have just a couple of slides about this one. This one is really aimed, in terms of users, this one is aimed at general users, which might be community members, particularly if a community is considering trying to highlight the predicament that they are in for the purposes of public education, or for grant writing, if they're trying to find some funding for something as drastic as community relocation, or for some smaller scale engineering project based on current needs with permafrost thaw. This allows them to zoom in, select their own community, and see highlighted data for that community. So the little mini map there shows all of the communities across the state that are included in this tool. And then from the drop-down menus, you can type in the name of a community. You can look at multiple communities at once. Right now, that drop-down menu just says GNOME, but you can look at and compare multiple communities at once. And you can see data not just on overall risk, but on the subsets, the subcategories of risk, including massive ice, thaw susceptibility, existing problems, permafrost occurrence, and permafrost temperature. And all of those categories are then grouped together into a category of overall risk. So it gives kind of a snapshot view. It's very useful for comparing among communities. And this is again, a screenshot, but a zoomed in look. In this case, I went to the tool. I selected 3 communities, the small communities of Deering and Diomede, a larger community of Nome. And so then you can see in both the visual, sort of the size of the dot, which gives a visual sense of the size of the problem or challenge for each category, and then the same data in more tabular form below. So that's essentially what this tool does, but it can be, even though it's fairly simple and simplified data, it can help those who are less familiar with the different aspects of permafrost, the different issues caused by permafrost thaw, can help give them a clearer understanding. Because even in communities that are heavily affected by permafrost thaw, there's not always a clear understanding that all of these pieces of the puzzle are part of the story, that it's a question of not just is the permafrost thawing, but how close to thaw is it? Is it warm or cool? What is the thaw susceptibility, and do you have massive ice? So do you have that possibility for catastrophic thaw? Obviously, in areas where there is much lower moisture in the soil, you can have that thaw occurring with much lower risk of catastrophic slumping, thermokarst, and so forth. Okay. So segueing immediately to the next tool on the list. This one, Northern Climate Reports, is a much more complex tool, not in terms of the expected technical complexity or competence of the tool users, but in terms of how many different types of data are shown at once. So this is a tool that includes permafrost in the context of many other ongoing climate change effects. This is a thank you to the many, many people who were part of pulling this tool together. So this tool invites, again, general users, could be people from communities, could be people working for agencies, it could be planners, to bring forth their questions related to climate change, and then hone in those questions on a particular place or region, and offers them visual ways to share those results, graphs, tables, or downloadable CSVs for use in spreadsheets. So this is again, I'm working from screenshots here, but this is the landing page for Northern Climate Reports. I invite people to go play around, take a look at this yourself. From the landing page, you can type in any place name, so any community, no matter how small, but not only communities, but also these regions, boroughs, census areas, hydrologic units, or you can click on the map and zoom into that area, or you can choose directly by latitude and longitude. So 3 ways to choose a spot. Once you do that, here, clicking on the map, this is the screen that comes up next. So if you click on that map, then you get offered a whole bunch of options for different places and units that are close to where you clicked. So here you see that there are communities, but also hydrologic units, and those other land divisions. And once you select a particular location from that, then you're going to get a whole lot of results. So that those bullet points of results, you're going to get a summary, then you're going to get temperature results, precipitation, hydrology, permafrost, wildfire, and a new addition, climate protection from spruce beetles, which is actually a model that I built recently, and I'm working on editing the final publication for that. In this case, I selected the community of Nome. Notice that the Indigenous name is given in parentheses. We have a database we've been working on with partners to make sure we have all the correct local names for place names on our maps. There's sometimes a little bit of a delay, but recent updates have reduced the delay. I'm not doing a live demo because that's always risky on Zoom. I'm doing screenshots here. So you select Nome, you zoom in, and what you get first is a mini map that zooms into the place you picked, and a summary of expected changes out to the end of the century in that location with some of the most extreme changes highlighted. Notice that within that summary, permafrost is included. So here for Nome, it says models indicate permafrost degradation may occur at a rate of 1.8 inches per year. Obviously, there's much more information. When you scroll down, you would have to scroll through all those other results about those other variables. But since this group is interested in permafrost, I scrolled down to the permafrost mini maps for Nome. And here is where, as I said, we don't present just one result, we present multiple results. So first of all, notice that you can toggle between two different models. That's what those terrible acronyms are, GFDL and NCAR. Those of you who are familiar with global climate models might recognize those. We try to pick models that are disparate, that are reliable for the far north, that have been proven to be fairly accurate for this region, but are also somewhat disparate from one another. And then you see that you have different decadal time periods and different choices of model. What you're looking at right now are the GFDL results for different concentration pathways. The top row is 4.5, which is optimistic given our current trajectories. The bottom is 8.5, which is less optimistic in terms of greenhouse gases. You're seeing that obviously Nome is quite warm, permafrost is thawing, and that in both trajectories, there's expected to be no permafrost whatsoever by the end of the century. Very briefly, some of the other information that I skipped over, these are temperature indicators. Obviously, temperature is pertinent to permafrost, and the permafrost results that I'm presenting here were built by folks at the UAF Geophysical Institute Permafrost Lab, where they used our downscale temperature data and linked it to their permafrost model, which is calibrated using all the surficial layers, all the soil types, and so forth, calibrated to calculate ground temperature at various depths. But those temperature variables themselves can be parsed in different ways. So this is just an example of one of the tables that's also included in Northern Climate Reports for the type of information people are trying to get at, rather than just saying annual temperature is increasing by such and such, or monthly temperature. That information is included as well, but these indicators try to delve a little deeper into the questions people actually have about cold days, warm days, things that affect human lives and livelihoods most acutely. I threw in a red arrow there to highlight. Throughout this tool, you'll see these friendly orange boxes that say download as CSV. This is to make these data sets widely accessible to people who perhaps are not familiar with scripting, don't want to delve into Python or Java or R scripts or any of that, but are familiar with spreadsheets, as all of us, hopefully most of us are. So download data as a CSV, open it in Excel or Google Sheets. It gives everyone the opportunity to create their own graphs and tables and manipulate and just look at the data. So just one more screenshot here, a different location. This is, again, notice this says at about 3 feet depth. Yes, that is at 1 meter, but we offer choices of units because Americans are not always familiar with the metric system. This is from Mentasta Lake. So here are locations shifting from sporadic to far less permafrost over time. And of course, I'm in Fairbanks, so I threw in the same graphs for Fairbanks. Again, we are here in Fairbanks, we're rapidly losing our discontinuous permafrost. So here you see some dramatic color changes over time with predicted permafrost loss over time. But again, showing multiple trajectories, multiple futures, choices where you can see more than one model. And then in addition to the mini maps, there are graphs of the data. Again, this shows the depth to the top of permafrost. And if you download the data as a CSV, you get all of this, not just the temperature, but the depth to top of permafrost and other variables. And this shows that there are two models and two pathways, which is why you get multiple dots for each time period. And notice as you go out into the future, you see more variability between those pathways and models. Obviously, thaw in all cases, but the degree of thaw varies greatly. Okay, I have to keep this moving because we have limited time. So I'm jumping on to the third tool that I said I would tell you about. This is the engineering and design support tool. So this is a tool that is designed much more for the technically minded, for engineers. So it's a little it's a little more word heavy. If you go to the home page for this tool, which again is linked through our main page, you can start at the home, but I'm starting us with the tab that says climate maps. There are multiple statewide maps available there. Again, all of these data sets can be downloaded one way or another. So really quickly, this is a selection of maps you could click on. You can see them visually. You can download them. This particular one is showing projections for toward the end of the century, mean annual ground temperature at 1 meter depth. And these are based on different studies. You can see there. We've got Jorgensen, we got Obu, and I'm rushing through these. This might be information you're already familiar with. If we go to, that was supposed to be pointing to the home, not to the about side of things. But if you go to the direct homepage here, you can, again, choose places by name points by latitude and longitude. So some similar functionality to Northern Climate Reports. What you pull out of it is a little bit more technical, a little denser, and very much aimed toward the engineering side of things. So you pull out information on precipitation, temperature, but it's geared toward hydrology. It's geared toward calculating heating degree days, freezing index, thawing, and of course, I'm highlighting the data that comes up for permafrost. So here, what you're seeing are actually data previews and data summaries. It might be a little hard to see depending on the size of your screen, but notice you're given options for downloads. You again can download data as a CSV, but you get the academic reference there, and you can go straight to the source data output. So you can directly download the source data, and you can directly see these data previews and data summaries. What's included? So summaries and statistics, CSV previews and downloads, direct source data sets and metadata, academic references, and then Jupyter notebooks. I'll really quickly touch on that for those who are familiar with it. This screenshot shows at the bottom a link that says, use this data set in a modified Berggren frost depth calculator. So some of you may be familiar with what that means. You're trying to calculate frost depth from an engineering perspective. So you can jump in. This is a screenshot of that Jupyter notebook where you can input your own parameters and location. So this is clearly for those who are a little more on the programming side of things. So that was a very, very quick run through. Obviously, you can't take much of a deep dive, but that's for anyone here who is an engineer, hopefully is a useful resource. I'm going to quickly touch upon how these tools are built. So we have an application programming interface, an API, that allows open access. Anyone can link to our API, can pull data directly from our API, but the two latter tools that I talked about, the Northern Climate Reports and the Arctic EDS, are built directly from our API. So the idea is that we don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time we add to a tool or build a new tool. And we also want our public access points to work swiftly. We're essentially slicing and dicing data into all kinds of different configurations. We're saying, okay, you can choose your location, you can choose your time period, you can choose your model. It's essentially a multivariate space. It's data cubes, multidimensional data cubes, which makes it sound very Star Trek, very very complex, but essentially we're saying we want to give you views into the data from whatever angle you want a view in terms of time, space, variable, and location. The API allows us to do that. So we're using Northern Climate Reports as an example, or other web applications, EDS, anything else we build in the future. They pull from a cache. The cache is linked to our data API. That API is built from all of the data sets that you see on the right. So that's a very simplified model, but essentially we're feeding all of these many data sets in and then caching data for speed of access. So our tools are translating from text to data to charts, turning human questions into data questions, and then turning data questions back into human information. So someone comes with an actual question, it points toward our API, earthmaps.io, and pulls out the information they need. That is what the raw information looks like. And of course, that is what it looks like, the mini maps translated on the sites that I just showed you. The idea here is that it's swifter, it's more efficient, and it allows these service endpoints to be readily available, but also to be flexible, so that when we add more data, we don't have to rebuild and create an entirely new tool. We can add additional data layers, put something, for example, I said, oh, I had this beetle modeling project that was added to Northern Climate Reports after we had launched Northern Climate Reports, because it was a separate project with separate funding. And the outputs from it were not directly tied to what had previously been used in the tool. However, it was deemed to be an additional useful piece of information for someone querying a particular point in the state of Alaska. Okay, they're going to get all the temperature data, the hydrology, the permafrost. Maybe they also want to know about the climate impacts to beetle risk. That gets rolled in through the API, becomes part of the tool. The tool doesn't have to get rebuilt in the process. So everything exists as a layer. Okay, having said all that, I'll talk at the end here a little bit about our dreams for the future. So we've been building up these the data sets themselves and the API to try to make everything as accessible as possible to the widest array of people possible. So the next stage in our in our process here for the SNAP team, which again is heavy on some folks who are really amazing at data wrangling, and I owe all of this to them. The next stage in the process is building what we're calling the Arctic Data Collaborative. And that is already live. It exists at the website that you can see at the top of your screen, arcticdatascience.org. We try and find URLs that are actually memorable and not too lengthy. We're well aware that everyone can drown in acronyms, such as all those acronyms for the global climate models and so forth. But in any case, we grabbed that URL and we're building this shared data collaborative, which might be pertinent to some of the people who are on this call, in that we are really interested in sharing all pertinent data sets in ways that hopefully can be beneficial to all of us. Of course, there are issues with data sovereignty. There are issues with people who are, have data ownership for reasons of publication, or who have data sovereignty from Indigenous rights holders, from communities. So obviously we want to be really careful about what data is shared and how it's shared. But as much as possible, we want to provide and share highly curated, relevant Arctic data sets to make data access more streamlined, but also to make it easier to compare, overlay, contrast, and visualize data, because a single data set on its own might not have as much meaning that can be drawn from it as comparing across data sets, or being able to overlay something that has to do with vegetation with something else that has to do with ground temperature, something else that has to do with hydrology. Together, those tell a story about change across the Arctic. Okay, so this is a screenshot, as you can see, January 2025 edition with large disclaimers saying that this is in progress. But I'm highlighting this in part because we are greedy for comments, and we would love to send folks like those of you who are on this call to our pre-release site so that you can tell us what is wrong, what needs changing, what is bad. And I should have mentioned that the same thing is true for the other sites, the other tools that I mentioned. That website that you see, the email address that you see highlighted there, UAF Snap Data Tools. Please do email us. Don't be shy. That email goes to 8 of us who are on the project team. So you're sending an email to 8 real humans, and then we jump on Slack together and say, oh, who wants to answer that tricky permafrost question that just came in? And it's always incredibly helpful to us to get that kind of feedback, even if it's negative feedback saying, this is broken, this makes no sense, this doesn't work, this isn't useful to the type of work I need to do because XYZ. So we're always trying to build things that are more useful. And if we have sites or tools or data that's not useful, we want to know that. So that being said, we have formatted this. It looks a little bit like a newspaper, and that's intentional. We want people to be able to see data stories, browse data stories, while still directly accessing the data sets that are there. So along the left-hand side there, these are some data sets we're highlighting, freeze thaw cycle data from the newest CMIP 6 climate data. Some of these, so you see maximum 1-day precipitation. That's the type of curated data that tells a little bit more of a story that weighs into the type of concerns that people have about ongoing change. And these are in the works, being updated right now. So sea ice concentration, that's a new data set, hot day threshold, vegetation types, and at the bottom there you see permafrost depth, base and top. So there are permafrost data sets in here. All of this has been added really, really recently. And then in the central part of the page, where things that look a little bit more like news stories, we, and particularly shout out to our communication director, Meg DeLue, have been taking some of these data sets and actually writing short narratives about the story behind them, to help bring the data sets to life a little bit more. But the key point here is that these are not all our data sets. Many of them are data sets that we have done the downscaling, the curation, and they're held on, they're stored on our on our hard drives already. Others, we welcome the sharing of data sets that are not ours, with obviously full consideration of people's publication, people's rights, everything fully referenced. But we are trying to build a data set that encompasses a little bit more than what we already have on hand. So from this RDAC interface, this is the newest, the latest and greatest. This was just made live a couple of weeks ago. The data set I just mentioned that was at the bottom of the list, permafrost, depth, base, and top. So if you click on that data set, you get essentially, as it says in the header, you get a data set X-ray, which lets you view maps, charts, and drill into this to pull out. Again, you can pull out CSVs from this. So you can look at different time periods for the base depth and the top depth for permafrost from a couple of different models here. And from that, you can generate graphs like these. Obviously, some of these have large uncertainties, some of them have smaller uncertainties, but this is, you can see this is for the greenhouse gas concentration pathway 8.5, and it's fully labeled graphs showing 2 different models for time periods, different time periods out into the future. These actually go out now to 2120. We're projecting past the end of the century, because this is the newest CMIP 6 data as opposed to the CMIP 5, which only went out to 2100. So I'm getting close to the end of my time. I'm watching my clock here. But this again, these are some of the permafrost data sets or permafrost related data sets currently available through RDAC. Again, this is very, very much a work in progress. So talic thickness, maps of permafrost research, ground temperature, combining permafrost observations with climate data. You can search, you can look. These are the 5 items that currently pop up if you search for permafrost, and you can click through and examine all of these. Yes, we're trying to build and share information. And this, again, if you click through, you see you can download data as not just as a CSV, but as a JSON file. And the links that are available here, notice the academic reference with Marchenko, Romanovsky, and Tepenko. But also notice that there are links that go back to some of the things I already mentioned: Northern Climate Reports, Arctic EDS, the API, and direct download locations. This is my final slide. I think I'm just about on time here. I believe that this presentation will be shared after the fact. So I threw in some of these direct links here on the final page. My name, my email address is kind of stuffed in the middle there, nlfresco@alaska.edu. You can also email all of us at that other email address, Snap Data Tools. And then some of the sites that I highlighted, including one I didn't mention, the GitHub site. So if you are someone who likes to dive directly into GitHub, by all means, join us there. So we really, really welcome access, commentary, and contributions as much as possible. And that brings me to the end. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I will go and look now to see. It looks like we have at least one question already in Q&A, and please add to the Q&A. Galina Jonat, and apologies, I'm probably mispronouncing your name. It says in the community risk you show a rating of confidence. How is this determined? And is it the same for all aspects, massive ice, thaw susceptibility, et cetera? That is a really excellent question. As I said, with regard to, and I assume this is in relation to that first tool I showed that just had a sort of circular circular blobs for community risk. The answer is that the rating of confidence is based on looking at multiple models and multiple concentration pathways. So it might not meet precise criteria. Sometimes it's hard for me as a scientist. I think many of us here are trained as scientists, and we like to have confidence intervals that are statistical. I even teach statistics to students over in natural resources. It's nice to be able to say, this is with a 95% confidence interval based on. These are a little bit more loosely defined in terms of there being multiple potential futures, multiple models. So the confidence is essentially determined based on the disparity between the outputs from multiple downscaled climate models and from multiple pathways. So in that sense, to answer the other part of your question, is it the same for all aspects? In that sense, yes. Part of the issue is that there might be a very different apparent confidence, not because the data are incorrect or wrong, but because especially one issue I think probably everyone here is familiar with is that permafrost is something that has tipping points. And so it can become very, very difficult when we're looking at a variable like precipitation or temperature that's a continuous variable. It's a little bit easier to show confidence as, okay, we're looking at, say, 5 degrees of warming for the month of July, but the confidence is, plus or minus 2 degrees. And that's a little bit more of a normal confidence interval. Whereas with permafrost, obviously presence and absence, tipping points for thaw are a little bit more of a yes or no. And we struggle with the same thing when we do fire modeling. Something's either on fire or it isn't on fire. It's a threshold variable rather than a continuous variable. So representation of risk becomes a little more difficult. And I actually, again, in these saying we welcome input, we would really welcome input from you, the permafrost experts, the permafrost community, on what kind of representations of uncertainty are most helpful. Because of course we can represent ground temperature, and obviously if ground temperature is above 0 Celsius, that represents thaw. But even so, that in itself, it can be challenging because ground temperature remains right at that 0 point for a very long period of time as thaw occurs because of latent heat of freezing. Again, I'm preaching to the choir here. Everyone here is a permafrost expert, but that can be really tricky too, because if obviously if you have ground that is well below the freezing point, it is frozen. If it's well above the freezing point, it's not. But the fact that ground in discontinuous permafrost regions remains right at freezing point for a long period of time as it's absorbing heat through that period of thaw adds to the uncertainty of modeling. So yeah, if people have questions or comments about how we can best represent that uncertainty, that would be really welcome as well.
Thank you, Nancy. This is a very educational. While others are thinking about any questions, and if any, and feel free to type in under the Q&A button. And I want to start with a question. There are multiple major database in Alaska, and such as the State of Alaska Geoportal that has a very comprehensive GIS imagery. I know different databases have their different focus, but they also overlap. So I wonder what's the snap and any overlap, or for people to guide people to search for things and where we should go. So what's your thought on that?
Yeah, and it's really hard. That's something we discuss every single day. Yeah, I work with a group that's very communicative, and yeah, we're always exploding our Slack channels. I think it is really tricky because too much information can sometimes become less useful. So that word curated data, and it can become tricky to figure out what to include, what not to include. I think one key point is that although of course we sort of work in that general GIS space as well, we tend to work very heavily in what I called like maps without gaps, continuous or raster rather than vector data sets. And nothing against, I mean, there's tremendous repositories of amazing or sort of GIS vector data sets. What's tricky is that we want to be able to offer information, not necessarily always statewide and not always Arctic wide. And I should have highlighted the fact that some of our data sets are just for Alaska. Others have a broader scope. So that's a little confusing already. We do have quite a lot of data for Western Canada. We've had really fruitful partnerships with the Yukon and Northwest Territories, and we're always looking to expand partnerships further. So we don't have always the same continual area, but the way that our data, I discussed our API and how our data layers work. Those are raster data sets, and all the search tools I demonstrated, you can click anywhere on the map, any pixel on the map will give you data. That isn't to say that we wouldn't include vector data sets or point data. However, our goal tends to be trying to get those larger scale data sets to play together, to tell stories together. So if you have a statewide vegetation map and you have a statewide temperature map and you have a statewide hydrology map, you start to be able to say, okay, well, how does temperature affect hydrology, affect vegetation, and so on. And be able to think about those overlays. It gets much harder. I mean, there's amazing borehole data from particular sites. There are amazing research projects that have been done in particular locations. As a biologist myself, I'm familiar with amazing ecological work done at Toolik Lake Field Station and the Bonanza Creek LTER. Incredible data sets there. However, we wouldn't want to mesh, say, the the Bonanza Creek LTER has a great website. We wouldn't mesh that with ours because they do different things. One is for a particular location and takes a really deep dive. And I know they have permafrost stakes at that particular location. And I've looked at them and I've looked at that data, and it's really, really useful, but it's for a very particular site. So I guess that partially answers the question, is that we have a strong bias, if you will, toward larger and more continuous data sets. However, there are exceptions to that. We have sea ice data, which of course is that's not a continuous data set across Alaska. There's not sea ice here in Fairbanks, but it's still a raster data set, and there are very good reasons for including that. Is that a beginning of an answer to your question? I mean, it's a really, really important question.
Yes, Nancy, that's helpful. Yeah, it seems Galina has a follow-up question, if you can take a look.
Oh, yes. Okay. When you showed temperature indicators, you said these were calibrated in a way before the permafrost model was forced. How is the terrain defined in the model for each raster cell? And for that, I would invite you to go to, we do highlight the publications that came out of the Geophysical Institute. So there was the UAF Geophysical Institute Permafrost Lab, and some amazing scientists who worked there created a permafrost model that they then linked with our climate data. So that model, I've read all their papers, I'm familiar with their model, but I hesitate to explain it for them. Yes, they do use multiple terrain descriptions. And I can you can find those references on our website. But if I'm understanding the question, multiple terrain descriptions to express uncertainty, actually, I think the answer there is no. I could be wrong, but I think for each particular pixel or cell, there was the best available model of what the vegetation is at that site, what the soil type is at that site, what the hydrology is at that site, overlaying those multiple layers. But no, there were not, in fact, multiple terrain descriptions and multiple pathways there. So that is a source of uncertainty. If the vegetation pixel for a cell was incorrect, then that would affect that model. And we do try to include as much as possible caveats. And I should have said, in describing these models, even though we try to downscale and have everything be fine scale and locally pertinent, there are very real limitations to how locally pertinent any permafrost model can be. And again, all of you probably know this better than I do, but there are minute level variability. I mean, there can be a tiny ice lens, literally under my cabin that I'm in right now, and then a few meters over, there's no ice lens. And the variability, if you dig down, the permafrost is incredibly variable, and particularly in places with discontinuous permafrost and ice lenses. Any actual engineering project, we are not pretending that we could fully inform the minute detail of an engineering project based on these tools. What we're hoping to do is give big picture information, particularly about the future and life cycle scale of an engineering project. So if a project is going on in a place where there is rapid thaw occurring, where the models suggest that permafrost will change radically in the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years, we want that information to be available. But yeah, I'm not an engineer. None of us on the team are engineers at that scale where we would be able to micromanage someone's project. So I should have said that at the outset.
Thank you, Nancy. Great. Any further questions, feel free to type under the Q&A. I have a question regarding the update of the database. I suppose it is a significant undertaking to keep the database updated, up to date. I wonder how often, do you have to update any database? And I noticed you mentioned the ground ice map by Jorgensen in 2008. So any thoughts on that about the database update?
Yeah, and obviously that's a pretty old source. 2008 is now a long time ago. We try to include whatever data sources are available. We would love if there are, statewide permafrost maps that are newer. I mean, we include multiple maps in that instance because, again, we want to show, multiple efforts, and so different modeling efforts. Again, that is part of the effort to say, well, there's disagreement between models or between maps. We'll show all of them. Because I'm now the old institutional memory for our research group. I've been with it since the beginning in 2007. All of our data has been updated multiple times since then because we were basing things first on the CMIP3. I've been referencing these, the global data that we downscale. So we had CMIP3, we had CMIP5. Everything is shifting to CMIP6, although we still have a lot of the CMIP5 data available. It's still highly pertinent. So that's the really big level updates, those sort of global level, redoing everything, redownscaling everything. So that we do every time there are new global models. Fine scale updates we do constantly. And we're always searching for better data sets. I've been highlighting these permafrost data sets from our partners at the Geophysical Institute, but we would love to recreate those. They just have not been recreated yet. Anytime there are new and better and different data sets, we want to add and include them. The flexibility of doing that through an API is really wonderful because you can play jigsaw puzzle, you can mix and match. You don't have to rebuild and reinvent everything to slide a new data set in and then have it immediately play with all the other data sets. And so that's part of the idea of RDAC is that we fully intend to be constantly adding data sets to RDAC and when appropriate, pulling out, or archiving data sets that are older and less relevant. Or adding a note to it saying this is no longer the most up-to-date data set. So it's a continual process with different benchmarks, some really large scale updates like CMIP6 and so on, and a lot that are much smaller in scale when we become aware of new data sets, or when other researchers, we're adding, someone's working on statewide species maps and curating those, and we say, okay, when that's done, we'll put those species ranges up as a continuous data set. So obviously we work across disciplines. The key points are that we update continuously, but we try to show a range of data sets because there's disagreement among models, but we try to only share data sets that are very well curated, and where there's inevitable uncertainty in any given data set, but we try to have it be clearly explained so that users have transparency.
Thank you. This is very helpful. We're at the top of our hour, and thank you again, Dr. Fresco, for a very informative webinar. And I'll email your slides, and with your permission, you have given me already. I appreciate that.
Of course.
To our participants, and right after the webinar. And if anyone needed the PDH certificate and professional development hour, and feel free to contact me. Great.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to everyone for participating. Really, really appreciate it. And do follow up everyone with questions and comments.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.